Perfect. All right. Well, I'm here with Neil Haverstick. Neil is a guitarist from Colorado who specializes in microtonal guitar, and I'm really excited to go through a ton of different microtonal stuff. But Neil, can you first introduce us to yourself by way of telling us about your coffee habits, if you have any?
Oh, I love it. I have gone to a coffee shop every morning, probably for the last 20 years, if not more. It's a habit. I mean, if you wanted to assassinate me, you know where I'll be every day in the morning. So I get it. But I like coffee and I like to read the paper, even though the papers these days are pretty shitty.
Hmm.
It's just the feeling of sitting there, being out a little bit out of the house and waking up and do it every day.
And you do a physical paper,
Yes.
not a virtual paper.
And I do, look, here's what happens, just riffing on coffee. When I wake up in the morning, I'll spend an hour or two, depending on time, looking at this news source, that one, reading articles, just seeing what's going on.
Hmm.
And then we grab the paper. I hate to say it, the Denver Post has gone way, 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 way down.
Mm.
It's owned by a hedge fund now out of New York.
Oh goodness, yeah.
They gutted the editorial. I mean, they gutted the reporters. 60, 70 people went. So it's, you
Mm.
know, something I like to do. And I'll bring a book. If I got time, I'll read a book. But by the
Well,
way, since coffee, that means mocha to me, not coffee.
okay, interesting.
Without chocolate, there is no coffee. How's that?
Man, it's a funny thing to get like a little snapshot of everybody's personality by what they drink coffee wise, and I think that a mocha is the first. This is the first time I've heard that. That's great. Um, cool, interesting. Is there a coffee shop you like in Denver?
Oh, they're called Caribou. It's a chain, but some of the mom and pop places, I'm very particular about coffee. If it doesn't taste just right, I'm out of here.
Have you ever been to a Sweet Bloom?
Never heard of it.
Interesting. I was at one point deep in the coffee game, and I went as far as actually to go to Denver to compete in a coffee competition that was there a few years ago. So,
Well,
um,
what's a coffee competition?
I mean, like people competing over who brews the best coffee. I didn't
Ah,
do very well, but
so you brew your own coffee?
hmm.
Oh,
I
very
mean, yeah,
cool.
yeah, I was in the industry for a while, and so I take it very seriously. I'm the type of guy that shines a laser through coffee to get the refractive index and all this stuff. So
You know what's
alternate.
interesting? I mean, just riffing. That's what I like to do. I like history, and I was reading about in Bach's time. Coffee shops were brand new, and there was debates about it. People said it was sinful and against Christianity. I mean, just crazy shit.
Hmm.
Do you know about Bach and Zimmerman's coffee house?
No, not at all. Please tell me.
He was a hardworking feller. The last 27 years of his life, he lived in Leipzig and wrote a cantata every weekend for four churches. So he was a busy boy. But for his own music, there was a place called Zimmerman's. So he'd get all these college kids in there and have music nights, and they played his music. True
Interesting.
story.
And we're talking JS, right?
JS. And
Not
he
PDQ
got
or
paid,
anything.
but I don't think the students did. So
Interesting.
that's how he would get his own music performed. But much the same as we do now.
Interesting. It's funny. I've never really thought about Bach and coffee at all, but
He
yeah.
wrote a piece called The Coffee Cantata, which I've never heard. It's humorous, about a girl that her dad wants her to give up coffee, but she won't do it. Blah, 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 blah. Crazy shit.
Interesting.
I'm a big Bach guy.
He's the master. Um, Man, actually, speaking of Michael Kudirka, he was doing this, guitar quartet of well-tempered clavier pieces, and I think he's recorded them with his microtonal guitars, so it's like perfectly in tune, and it's lovely. It's just so resonant, and yeah, I'll share it with you when we're done with this. But
Could you send me a link? I'd
yeah,
like to hear
absolutely.
it.
Yeah, it's so nice and in tune. But uh, interesting. So, before we dive straight into microtone stuff, I was curious. You mentioned in one of these videos that you used to collect spiders, and I have some love for invertebrates, and I'm just curious, what that's all about.
Okay, I will tell you. Let's see, it was 86, it all changed. I used to have dreams about spiders everywhere.
Hmm.
Really interesting. I didn't know why. They never touched me in the dreams. There'd be webs all over a room, and I'm walking through it, and spiders, and okay. And one night, this is, you asked, I had a dream that there was a big spider in my hand, yippee, and it bit me, but it didn't hurt, and I didn't scream. And after that dream, everything changed, and that's when I started collecting spiders.
Interesting. Okay. So
My
you're saying dream specifically, not nightmare, right?
No, they weren't nightmares. They just happened. I didn't know why. And my last spider just died a few months ago. She was like 25 years old.
Huh.
They can live a long time.
What sort of variety did you have?
I'm sorry.
What were like the different? I mean, did you have like different types of spiders, or like did you go out and get like are they large spiders? Or are they little tiny friends? Or
The last one was what we call a rose hair, about like that, not huge.
okay,
I just got on a spider forum on Facebook. Oh my God. I'm a greenhorn. I mean, I had 15, 20 spiders at one time, maybe 15.
wow.
But these guys are putting up pictures of these incredible, beautiful spiders and how they take care of them and all. So I'm learning.
Hmm. Man, yeah, spiders are such a beautiful creature, and yeah, I shared this little blog post with you about this guy doing photography on the spiders, and I just thought it was such a beautiful piece that he wrote because you know he realized that he has all these roommates that he wasn't aware of previously. So, do you pay attention to the wild spiders in your house as well, or?
Yeah, I've got these real funny looking ones. They're called, somebody told me they're called cellar spiders, kind of like a daddy long legs, real thin legs.
Okay.
And they'll just pop up here and there, and I don't pay much attention to them.
Well, all right. Well,
I would say pound for pound, they're the scariest animal in the world. They terrify people.
hmm, yeah.
They're weird. They're weird fox.
I wish. I mean, like I feel like I have a little bit of a not like I have such a reverence for them, but I do feel like a little like like some sort of provocation by them that makes me a little bit averse. But anyway, I just wanted to ask about the spiders because
Well,
it's an interesting little
and,
side hobby.
well, I don't know how much of my music you've heard, but I wrote a piece called
Hmm.
Spider. It's on 5 of my CDs. It's kind of like my signature piece. So I'm into it.
I heard you perform that in that video, and so is that um like is that mostly a composition, or is that like are you improvising based on some sort of structure, or
Yes.
okay?
It's a good way to start. It's each version on my CDs is different. And again, back to Bach, he would write a piece for keyboard and then arrange it for lute or orchestra. He did that over and over and over. So that really influenced me. So with Spider, my first version was in 92. I won a big contest in Guitar Player magazine with a 3-minute piece. It had to be 3 minutes, called Spider Chimes. And I put that on my first album. Then I've got a space version on my third album. I got one on my fifth, jazz trio version. Then I did an orchestral version. Oh, hold on, one of my ferrets. Oh, gee, jerk. Oh my God, it's your ass. Hold on. I have ferrets too. I love these guys to death. This is Space Weasel.
Hey, Space Weasel.
He just knocks something over like he likes to do. They're a riot. Funniest animals on the planet. Anyway, so a friend of mine, Thomas Blomster, arranged some of my riffs of Spider for his chamber orchestra.
Cool.
10 strings and percussion, and we recorded it. It's on my album Spider. They did a really good job.
Awesome.
So it's based off, you know what a serial row is?
Mm-hmm.
Orange
Like a 12-tone thing? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, this is a 19-tone serial row I came up with.
Okay.
So that's what the piece is based off of, basically. So each version, yeah, I get the row going and then I improvise wherever it goes.
Okay, and so this is on the 19-tone equal temperament guitar?
Yeah. I've got a electric and an acoustic.
Gotcha. Interesting. And it uses all 19 of those tones. How did you just sort of happen upon that row, or where did you get the row?
Good questions, dude. A number of my 19-tone pieces actually started out in 12, and then I would adapt them.
Okay.
So this piece was years ago. I won that contest 30 years ago, So I already had a little bit of Spider and 12, and then I just started screwing around with it and improvising, and somehow I can't tell you how came up with the serial row.
Gotcha. But you just jotted it down and you have it ingrained in your mind now.
It's funny, I talk about this with my students all the time. It's actually really easy for me to play, but if I handed that guitar to most human beings, it'd be a slog. Sense of humor. For me, it's easy because I wrote it.
Right.
And I played in a lot of situations where the music was very difficult for me. Well, I didn't write it, so I had to find it, if you will. But my music, not hard at all.
Now, with a 19-tone guitar, like I'm a bit of like a mathematics fetishist. Like I'm not great with it on my own, but I do appreciate it. And so 19 is a prime number, and I saw that you have like 34 tone, 22 tone, and so I'm curious, sort of how numerological you get, and if there's anything special about 19 being a prime or other sort of compound numbers or composite numbers.
These are the things that you will see discussed over and over and over. It's a good discussion. I get it. The way I got 19, I have a great friend. We still play together, bassist named John Starrett, who got me into this. In 1989, it was simple. He brought a 19-tone guitar over. Said, I haven't looked back. It's the old saying. I didn't look back. I was in. So as far as the numerological, I didn't think of any of that. I get it. And I'm aware that there are, let's put it this way. I love science, but I believe there's more to the universe than just that. So I'm not a mathematician either, but I know some geniuses. So it's just a matter of chopping up the octave into 19 or 24 with logarithms. So that's what equal temperament is. And it just so happens that 19 will give you these thirds and 34 gives you those thirds. To me, it's just kind of like an accident of mathematics. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I mean, when I heard you playing on it, you're showing these different intervals, and I was very impressed by how in tune so many of them seemed. And it's interesting knowing that it is, a logarithmic temperament, because like, for a while I went through a phase of being like, the guitar is a terrible instrument because it's so poorly tuned. And meanwhile you're playing with this like obscure temperament, and it sounds so resonant. So, happy accident.
When I started out, it's been 89, so 33 years. I didn't know anything. I had heard of quarter tones, like a lot of musicians. I saw Ravi Shankar in 1968. I got an album with the Oud in 67. So I've been aware of Arabic and Indian music my whole life, but you'd read about quarter tones. Okay. Well, once John gave me the 19 tone, I just started digging in. That's what I do. And I started meeting, I met Schneider, Johnny Reinhardt, John Catler, all the names, and did gigs. And you mentioned Seth Ayres. Some of his articles really helped me. I didn't know anything. So I'd be reading, I can do this, I can do that. So he might not know it, but he was a big influence on me when I got started.
Yeah, he spoke very highly of the way that you handle the 19-tone guitar.
Well,
you didn't mention the 34 or the 22, but yeah.
Well, my 22, by the way, is not equal tempered.
Okay, interesting.
Now, I mentioned John Starrett, but we're still doing gigs. He's a bassist. One of my two favorite bassists of my whole career. He's a monster player, and he got his PhD in math some years ago and went to New Mexico for like 15 years and taught, and then he came back. So he's retired now. But I came up with the idea for the 22-tone tuning on my own after many years of study. Do you know who Wendy Carlos is?
Yeah.
Beauty and the Beast. You heard that
totally.
one?
Absolutely, yeah.
There's a tune on there called Just Imaginings. And she uses the harmonic series from 16 to 32.
Okay.
For that tuning. She takes 12 notes out of the 16. Well, that tuning I really like. So my 22 tone has every harmonic from 16 to 32 plus 6 more notes. And I can never remember what they are. So John did the math on that one because that ain't logarithms. And he converted it to where my luthier, another guy named Brian Deckenbach, who's a great luthier, he did the fretwork.
Awesome. That's super interesting. So I have this friend I mentioned, Michael Gaderka, and he's working on this company where they have these magnetic fretboards where you can just swap them out in
Yes.
30 seconds.
Yes.
And I'm so curious, like, if you sort of like were able to just have whichever temperaments or whichever tunings, which ones would you go for? Like, what would be your first things if you were just have like an instrument you can swap it in and out effortlessly? Like, what's your collection
And
of most
again,
important?
these are great questions, dude. And again, these are things that people discuss over and over and over.
Mm-hmm.
How do I put it? Okay, I'm riffing on this, but I'm going to answer it in the best way I can.
Sure.
I play a lot of different styles of music to start with.
Mm-hmm.
So when people say like, who's your favorite guitarist? I can't say Jimi Hendrix.
Mm-hmm.
I have to include Paco de Lucia and Django Reinhardt and Joe Pass and a bunch of country guys. And,
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to a tuning, well, what do I want to do? What do I want to do?
Mm-hmm.
So there was a guy named Brian McLaren, who I think lives in Washington, Corvallis. I haven't heard from him in years. And he sent me a lot of papers early on. And he said something that seems real simple, but it's really profound. Which tunings, let's say temperaments now. Let's don't get into pure tuning just yet. Which equal temperaments give you pretty good thirds and fifths? Some do and some don't. So if you like chordal music, and I love chordal music, well, then you probably like temperaments with good thirds and fifths to play nice sounding chords.
That makes sense, yeah.
But I have friends that are in the 16 notes of the octave, which I would never want to play, but they make great music with it. Mm-hmm. So this is just a personal subjective choice. So 19, I have two 24 tone guitars, by the way. One's equal and another one is not equal.
Interesting. John
Starrett, it's every harmonic from 24 through 48.
Wow, cool.
And Starrett fretted that one. He's a sharp feller. Then I have 31, 34, and 36. Each one, the thirds may be better in this one. Blah, 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 blah. You kind of balance it all out. So 36, for example, is really just three 12-tone equal temperaments intertwined. Mm-hmm. So you could play in a 12-tone band with 36 and hit all the right notes. Mm-hmm. But when you add the other 24 notes, you get some really cool stuff. So 36-tone equal temperament, I've got one tune, is killer for blues because it gets the 7th harmonic, which is perfect for blues, and a bunch of other variations of the 7th harmonic. So when you play blues in the 36, it sounds really right, except you go, wait a minute. Wait, hold on here. You can hear it's a little different.
So would you say that, I mean, like, when you're finding which, temperaments have good thirds and fifths, are you kind of saying, like, the good, quote-unquote, thirds and fifths are the ones that are, like, in the harmonic series? Like,
yeah.
Does it always come back to the harmonic series?
Sure.
Okay.
Good question. It's the whole question. What is being in tune anyway? Mm-hmm. Well, closer you are to the natural harmonics, the more in tune you are. But wait a minute, I'm just riffing. What if you go up higher in the harmonic series? There's a lot of dissonance too. Mm-hmm.
But still derived from something, natural to some extent or something like that.
Well, there's a term, tension and release. That so you can hit a really gnarly sequence, but you resolve it, everybody goes,
yeah.
That's life. Mm-hmm. I like to say if you made a movie about a married couple that never had any problems, it'd be pretty boring.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Tension is part of life, and how do we resolve that tension? So in music, and I'm a big blues guy, that's my roots. I like to say blues is beautiful, but it isn't pretty. It's not a pretty music. Mm-hmm. Pretty gnarly. It's street. Well, in blues, you're always creating dissonance. You start bending strings, and now, wait a minute, how are you going to resolve that bend? Mm-hmm. And you can bend, and it's like, come on, dude, hit and bonk. Albert King's one of my favorite musicians, and he didn't have a lot of, intellectual technique, but goddamn, when he was on, get out of the way.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, with microtonal music, I feel like oftentimes the first thing somebody thinks of is like this overly academic sort of like nerd music, as it were. And it's really interesting to me that you are in this sort of grittier realm where like it almost feels more at home. I mean, it probably does feel more at home. Like, the seventh harmonic, that's essentially like the kind of like the flat seven or
It is.
sharp
It's just
six.
flatter than the 12-tone seven.
Mm-hmm.
You just
That
said
seems
something
perfect for
so
blues.
well. You just said something so important, man. Again, about the intellectual part. Look, I'm real street. I grew up in the slums of St. Louis as a kid, so we were funky little boys. Trust me. So I temper that language just to be humorous. But I can. You ever read Miles Davis's autobiography?
I think way back when, like a while ago, but
Well, he grew up in East St. Louis. The word motherfucker is like air in St. Louis. So that's how I grew up, but I temper it a bit. Sense of humor here.
mm-hmm.
But I respect anybody that goes for this, concept of microtones, but a lot of it can be just, how do I say it? It's not that it isn't good music. Let's put it this way. I have a good friend. She just moved to LA, by the way. She's out there now. And I sent her to some sites years ago, and she said, I can't listen to it. It's just so academic, intellectual. Well, that's a tricky word. That doesn't mean it's bad, but it's what you just said. Howlin' Wolf is different than Arnold Schoenberg.
Right, yeah.
You can't put this stuff in a little box. Everybody's got their idea, and I respect that. But give me Hank Williams any day when it ggets down to it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is why our little group out here, me and Starrett and the drummers we've used, we are different. Because we do play blues, reggae, jazz, and all this in microtonal tunings. You know John Cattler?
I don't know.
He was doing this before I was. He's a great guitar player. He's in Boston now. And they have, him and his wife have a blues band, the 13 O'Clock Blues Band. And he does all just intonation, though, for the most part.
Okay.
He's look into Cattler.
Definitely will. Interesting. The 13 has nothing to do with their selected temperaments or anything.
He's invented a guitar. It's really ingenious. He calls it 12-tone plus. It's 12-tone guitar, okay, but he'll put extra frets on for the 7th and 13th harmonics and stuff.
Interesting.
Which is really cool. So you could be playing in a regular blues band and then have access to the harmonic 7th.
Nice.
Yeah.
And what I think the videos I saw of you playing in like a trio, I think I saw that you're playing Les Paul. Is that just like a standard 12-tone Les Paul?
Yeah, if that was my blues band.
Gotcha. Okay. So the okay, I guess here I also saw that you were doing Squiers, and you're saying like they're $200. They stay in tune great. I mean, what would you say the cost of entry for like a microtonal instrument is if somebody wanted to get into it beyond the $200 for a Squier?
Yeah.
In terms of like refretting.
Perfect segue. So let me show you this. This is my book, one of them, hopefully Microtonal. It's about my instruments with a lot of anecdotes from my career too. And so I got pictures and graphs of all the tunings. The most expensive instrument I have is an oud I bought from a friend for $1,000.
Nice.
The Squiers were all $200. My Epis, one of them was given to me. I'm a big Epiphone Squier guy. Love them. So your cost of entry, look, make sure whatever the price you pay, that the guitar stays in tune, because if you're going microtonal, it does make a difference.
Right, totally.
Because you're trying to get those subtle shades, and if the guitar doesn't stay in tune, you're screwed. So you don't have to pay much at all. You got to know what you're looking for.
Is there any sort of advice you'd give somebody in finding like a capable luthier to do the fretting and make sure that everything's on point?
Yeah, it's funny because look, if it's just the logarithm system for equal temperament, any competent luthier should be able to do that.
Okay, interesting.
But some of them don't or won't. I've talked to guys all over the country, And I've referred a number of them here because we got John and Brian that can do this work. So 12 tone logarithmically is called the 12th root of 2. That's how you divide it up. Well, 36 is the 36th root of 2. It's the same principle. So in my fretless guitar, I have a Ibanez, $200. It's killer.
I love that attitude because so many people like I I know that you do have a lot of pedals, but I kind of like I frown upon the sort of like gear fetishism a little bit, where people just, here's my other guitar, here's like, it's like you don't need like a bunch of $1,000 guitars, like $12,000 on guitars right there. Shit.
That's why I wrote the book. And by the way, let me say something about pedals. When I do blues gigs, I got an Ibanez tube screamer. That's it. But nice. When I do my solo microtonal shows, I do a lot of looping. So I need all those delays, to set up the loops and all. So I've got 14 pedals on 2 different boards. So let's say I go to Boston. I went there last October. They all fit in my, I can get 7 pedals in my flight case.
Nice.
Perfect. And I'm always afraid the TSA is going to think they're bombs or something.
Yeah, TSA always thinks that my coffee is a bomb somehow. So
I know.
But I should be careful saying this. I don't want them to watch this and get any ideas. My buddy was saying that 19 equal temperament is hot right now, and he mentioned that 31 is also kind of coveted, but that you have to wrangle all these extra frets. So are there any temperaments that you like love, but they just have these practical limitations or like kind of inconveniences?
That's another great question. It connects to this. How do I say this? So here's 19 with 19 notes, and here's, let's say, 34. Well, I might not play the same kind of music in 34 that I do in 19. If it is hard to, you can't play a bar chord in 34. Don't worry about it. I don't play many bar chords anyway on microtones, but I can, of course. That's how I learned as a kid. Sure. So in 34, I tend to do more linear stuff, not as much harmonic stuff. It's just the way it works for me. 19, I'm as comfortable in 19 as I am in 12. No problem. I can play anything I want. Jazz, it doesn't matter. But that took a few years. So for chordal music, 24 is manageable, but that just gets you the 11 limit harmonics. It's not much different than 12. But 19 really is not like 12, although you can fool people in 19. It sounds, well, wait a minute. What? It's really cool. I love 19 because you can do blues and jazz and tweak it. Let me riff on that.
Sure.
I don't like hurting people's feelings. Everybody's human that plays, but here in Denver, it's a pretty mediocre blues scene.
Okay.
Sorry, it just is. I've been here 44 years. There's a few good players and a lot of bands, but it's mostly just jams and not what I consider great blues. That music to me needs to move on a little bit. I don't need guys sounding like Howlin' Wolf in 1956. I'm not saying it isn't good music. Don't get me wrong. I want to move it on, and that's what Catler's doing too. He does a lot of killer stuff. It just, like I said, you'll hear the blues licks and you go, well, wait a minute. What's he doing? So I want to, 19, what I'm trying to say is good for taking, let's say, traditional American music, for lack of a better term, Americana, and messing with it a little bit. You can, I got a country tune called Jimmy and Joe in 19. It's a riot. It's real fast, almost bluegrassy, but I can get those 2 extra beats in a measure because I got 19 tones instead of 12. You go, what the fuck? So if you picked up your 12 tone and tried to play it, you're dead.
Gotcha. With say like a tune like, say, like Giant Steps, where it goes between these different key centers, I assume that you would be able to mostly fool people, like you say, since it's a equal temperament 19. But does it start to get squirrely with something like that, like doing 19 temperament over a Giant Steps type tune?
you don't know this. I've rewritten Giant Steps for 19.
Cool.
I have a chart. I can play the chords. I haven't learned the solo over it yet, but I could. John and I rehearsed it a while back, but we just didn't have time to get into it. But there's a bunch of microtonalists that are always arranging giant steps for different tunings.
Okay.
So I did it in 19, and it's killer. Look, in the original giant steps are 16 measures. I have 28.
Okay.
So all I'm doing is keeping the basic structure and putting some extra passing chords in.
Gotcha. Interesting.
It sounds killer. So I'm on a lot of jazz threads in Facebook, and I'll see these guys talking about, what's next in jazz. And you mention microtonal tunings and nobody says anything because they're not thinking, well, what are we going to do next? Look, being 70, the one advantage is I've heard a shitload of music. Okay? Shitload, tons and tons and tons. So I've been hearing a lot of the same stuff, just riffing. Who's gone beyond Coltrane in a sense? I don't think anybody has. Who's gone beyond Hendrix and Machine Gun? I don't think anybody has. When I hear Machine Gun, which to me is one of the great statements of 20th century music, I watch it a lot on video, feedback and harmonics flying around. And well, nobody ran with that in guitar. Listen to Joe Bonamassa, who's a great player, but he's pretty conservative in my view, very conservative. That's why he's so popular, because people can hack it. Doesn't mean he can't play. I'm not dissing him, don't get me wrong. But who took what Jimi Hendrix did with the harmonics, and the feedback and all that, and ran with it? Maybe David Torn. You know who David Torn is?
Yeah, totally.
Fucking monster. His last album, ECM, was all looping, which he does. And so he's kind of ran with that a little bit. And that's what I try to do in my looping shows, because I can actually play my digital delays and do all kinds of cool stuff with them. And then Coltrane, I just heard something on the radio the other day, one of his, tunes, and it's like, man, why aren't people playing like that anymore?
Yeah.
But here's the problem. This is what I'm getting to. In 12-tone equal temperament, I don't think you can go beyond John Coltrane. He did it.
True.
That's just me.
I think
I would say sense of humor. Prove me wrong.
Yeah,
so to get beyond, go ahead.
I mean, I just agree. Like, I feel like, Coltrane was obviously such a capable, disciplined person, and he put in all the work, and I don't think that people these days want to put in that much work.
Well,
sadly.
Somebody said on one of the forums once, I said something about blues moving on, needing to move on, and they said, well, maybe it doesn't have to. Okay, I'm not going to debate that, fine, but Howlin, Wolf, and Muddy, they went to Chicago and took Delta blues and made it electric and changed all of music forever. Because the British guys got a hold of it, and then that became hard rock and heavy metal. So they went electric, is what I'm saying. When they went to, and Wolf was playing electric in Memphis, but how many Howlin' Wolf tunes were done? Cream did them, the Doors did them, Rolling Stones did it, and then that led you into, then you're getting into Deep Purple and Yes, and that's all Pink Floyd, and then the metal. Once you got Zeppelin, now and Cream, now metal's coming out of that. That's all from Delta blues. That simple.
I'm somebody who, like, I sort of never really got into blues. Like, I probably should have given it more attention, but I've always been into, like, other sort of geekier things. And so I'm curious, for somebody who's a noob to blues, what would your suggested listening be?
There's a lot. When you go back, the other thing is blues is so blues, jazz, country. These are all no more than 100 years old to start with. That's not much, considering Arabic music goes back thousands of years, and Indian music. So these are very new forms that developed in this country, from the mix of blacks and whites and Indians and all that. So you go back to Charlie Patton, who died in 1934. He was acoustic, of course. You might think of him as the root of a lot of this. Howlin' Wolf sounds like Charlie Patton in a sense. he hung out with Charlie Patton and learned how to play from listening to him. So you get Charlie Patton, Wolf, Muddy, Son House, Robert Johnson, of course, all those acoustic guys in the Delta. Okay, so that's all acoustic music. Then they moved to Memphis. I'm oversimplifying. And they started getting amps because you were in these loud clubs. Mm-hmm. So you had to have amplification. Well, then little Walter added amplification to his harmonica. And all of a sudden, he didn't sound like some guy on the back porch. He sounds like Jimi Hendrix playing harmonica, which he was. So little Walter's a big, big icon. Great harmonica playing. But Howlin, Wolf, Muddy Waters, Johnson, Sonny Boy Williamson, Albert King, B.B. King, those are the names you want to start with.
Okay. Awesome.
Howlin' Wolf's my personal favorite. I'm sorry?
Yeah, I'll have to do a listening party.
If I've got your email, I'll send you a few of my favorite tunes.
Beautiful. Okay, I'd love that. Cool. Let's see here. So, I spoke to Bill Cetheris and I asked him if he had any sort of insider questions that he knew would be juicy to ask you. And one thing he said was, "Why are you so microtonally hopeless?" And I was like, "That's kind of brutal, man." But then I realized, of course, it's your book. Can you get into what makes you microtonally hopeless?
Yeah. Okay, hold on one more time. Let me show you the cover. See that drawing?
Yeah, that's exactly you, right?
Well, I have a good friend, Mike Keefe. He's in Mexico now. He was the political cartoonist for the Denver Post for 36 years.
Oh, beautiful. Awesome.
He won a Pulitzer in 2011. He's one of the greats, all-time greats. Well, he was a student of mine for years. So years ago, he swapped me that cartoon for some lessons. Nice. And then when it came time to do the book, I said, "Can I use your tune?" And he said I could. It's meant to be, I think musicians have maybe the most advanced sense of humor of any group in the world. Just because of our lifestyle, how crazy it is. So by hopelessly microtonal, I'm just saying it's just what I do. Mm-hmm. Okay. Just what I do. But I played thousands and thousands of gigs, dude, in my career on 12-tone guitar, no problem. It's a great tuning system. It works. Mm-hmm. It was designed to play modulating chordal music. Mm-hmm. You can't do that in just intonation. So the Europeans invented, the keyboard and all this. Well, fuck, how are we going to modulate from C to C sharp? Game on. Mm-hmm. So the last 500 years are doing all this math, trying to figure out, if we go from C to C sharp, now the third sound awful. Mm-hmm. So they'd tweak, they'd start tempering this note. Okay, that's where well temperaments and mean tone and all that comes from, all the math. Mm-hmm. Interesting. So I'm just saying, hopelessly microtonal, there's a bit of humor in there.
Gotcha. Okay. Now I know that Bill, he's sort of like, I guess, is able to explore a lot of these things via a MIDI guitar. Have you ever been tempted by that, or do you have any MIDI guitars hanging out?
I do not. I would love to get more involved with that, but now you get into other subjective things. It's like it just didn't happen. Mm-hmm. I could have. I still could. Yeah. I have enough mathematical friends. They could wire me up to anything I wanted. But, I'm happy with what I can do with my pedals. I'm okay.
Gotcha. I feel like for me, I was sort of seduced away from the standard guitar by the laptop, and seeing that you can do anything you want with digital synthesis. But now, I spent too many years not really shedding guitar, so I feel like it bit me in the ass.
Hey, and again, this is just a good segue point. Even though I'm really into this, all this only impresses me as much as when the song is over, what am I left with? Mm-hmm. Oh, this is me being humorous. Jesus, that guy was fast. Hey, you want to go get coffee? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Where I hear Hank, I'm not kidding you. I will weep when I hear some Hank Williams tunes. There's a difference. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying one's better than the other, but I listen to jazz all day when I'm on the computer. We have a good jazz station here. Man, there's guys that, they're pretty outrageous musicians. No mm-hmm. doubt. But at the end of the day, it's got to move me. Mm-hmm. And what moves you may not move me and vice versa. And that's fair enough too. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
Sure.
Um, so I saw you also have books on harmonics and spirals, and then quote the form of no forms. Can you sort of tease what those are about a little bit?
Yes. So I just happen to have them here. So here's harmonics and spirals. What I wanted to do with that, and this was written in 2015, and hopefully Microtonal a couple years later. I'll talk about form and no forms too. That was in 1984. Harmonics and spirals. I got tons of theory books on tuning, and they all talk about the harmonic series, but just a little bit. And then this book will have a little bit, and then this book will have a little bit. So what I did in harmonics and spirals, I went from the first harmonic to the 32nd and just broke each interval down from the first to the second, second to third, and told you what they are. And then I did it with the ratios and then with synths. So you could see, the 5/4, all that is, man, is the distance between the fourth and the fifth harmonic. It's that simple. So the fifth harmonic is vibrating, I'll just use rounded numbers, 500 times a second. And the fourth harmonic is 400 times a second. That's a major third. So I wanted to simplify it. It's still a really tough subject. By the way, so the white triangle is from Pythagoras, and the black one, are you familiar with Erv Wilson? Oh boy, you should make a note of that name. He lived in LA his whole...
Is he that theorist from Mexico? No.
He went back and forth. He was born in Mexico, yes.
Okay.
And he was a botanist.
Maybe I knew a little bit from Wikipedia.
Well, just look up Erv Wilson. He died a few years ago. A very kind man, very humble, but one of the greatest geniuses you'll ever meet. I met him at a gig in El Paso in '97, and we hit it off. So the deal with Erv was he didn't even have a computer. So if you want to talk to Erv, you get on the phone to write him a letter.
Gotcha. Interesting.
So if you, John, were to say, hey, Erv, I heard about this and that. Could you send me some of your work on that? He'd send you a bunch of papers. He did that for everybody. So I have a stack at least 2 feet high of papers Erv sent me.
Wow.
And I'm not a mathematician, but you don't have to be a mathematician to understand, for example, that gravity bends light. A 5-year-old can understand that, but you do have to be a mathematician to figure out how it got there. Okay, I'm just making a point. So I can understand some of the things that are talked about without the math to get there.
Right.
So this black triangle, there's 7 or 8 of them in his papers. He calls them the scales of Mount Meru.
Okay, I love it.
And this one, it's based off the Fibonacci series. So he was building musical scales by taking the numbers of the Fibonacci series and then really putting them on like a keyboard. Really cool stuff.
Nice.
So like I said, you can understand that. I can't do the math, but I go, it's a 23-tone Fibonacci scale. Gotcha. Sure.
Now, you asked if I was like, if I did microtonal music, and I don't really do microtonal music per se, but maybe I sort of do. And like, you're saying the 4 against 5 is kind of a major third. And so I consider myself much more of like a rhythmic sort of guitarist and like a formal type person. And so like, there are generally like these big structural Elliott Carter-esque polyrhythms, but I'm saying maybe I am a microtonal musician because at some level those rhythms are microtonal intervals, right? Just stretch way.
You just opened up another door. There are people that have gone into microrhythms. Now I haven't studied it, but they're talking about that too. So how do you sync up the microtones with the microrhythms? There's a whole nother study. And then you hit a drum, and those are inharmonic partials. They're not like the harmonic series. So now what? I ain't got time to do it all.
Right. Is there anybody in that field that you would point me towards?
You live in LA. You should get to know John Schneider.
Okay.
He's one of the cats. He's one of the heavy dudes. He won a Grammy in 2015 for Harry Partch album.
Okay. Oh yeah, shit. He's the Harry Parch ensemble guy, huh?
I did a gig in New Mexico a few years ago, and he was there. They paid him, and he hauled a bunch of the instruments to New Mexico.
Wow, cool.
So I got to see some of them. I don't. I think they're copies. I think the Harry's somebody at a university has custody of those, but I can't remember who.
Interesting.
But Schneider has a radio show every Thursday, dude, on some station there. I can't remember what it is.
I'll definitely scope it out.
Look him up.
Cool. You were I cut you off when you were talking about the triangles. So Mount Meru and Erv. What were you saying about those?
Well, when you look at the triangle, there's one at the top, and then it goes the next level, and so he's I see the math.
Mm-hmm.
And so from dividing these numbers up into different segments, that's where he starts building the ratios for the scales. So there's 7 of them, and each one is harder than the last.
Gotcha. Interesting.
And he used to say, I loved Erv. I feel very blessed. He really liked me. I've heard from other people. He really respected what I did. He knew I wasn't a math guy, but he knew I did it here.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a lot of his letters, and he'd send me 3x5 cards. And he'd say, drink a Phaedra tea and use this kind of honey. Oh, he was a riot.
That's amazing.
Oh, I loved him to death. For such a genius, he was very down home. He had no pretensions like some geniuses do. But yeah, look up Erv Wilson.
Most definitely.
He big deal.
A Phaedra tea.
Well, he was a botanist.
Mm-hmm.
And he sent me a whole bunch of articles about legalizing marijuana.
Interesting.
And
wow.
building a port in Mexico, and and I look, killer Erv. We only met twice.
Interesting, man. That's cool. Form of No Forms. That was before the Spiral book. So what's the Form of No Forms?
Okay, I wrote that in '84. I started studying jazz with a brilliant alto player named George Keith in '76. Him and a guy named John Parsons they just had a little school at George's home up in 5 Points in Denver. So I met him. I was with George for at least 10 years, maybe 15. Brilliant bebop sax player, but he was really open-minded here. Mm-hmm. So let's see. So after a few years, I just thought, I want to put some of this down in paper form. So I wrote the book. It's before I got into microtones. Mm-hmm. So it's about 12-tone theory. And I had a couple really good experiences with that. I met Joe Pass, the great jazz player, in a weird circumstance, and gave him a copy of the book. Well, he wrote me a letter 6 months later and endorsed it in a letter.
Awesome. Nice.
And then Tommy Tedesco, the great studio player, did the same thing. So it's a good book for 12-tone theory. It'll take you a long way.
Interesting. Okay. I have curiosity. Do you know Frank Potenza?
I know the name. He's a big Joe. He studied with Joe. He's played with Joe. Mm-hmm. Do you know him?
Yeah, I used to study with him briefly when I was at USC, but I knew that he was supposed to be like Joe Pass's like protege or something.
Well, he was on Facebook. Haven't seen him in a long time. Mm-hmm. No, he's one of those badass. He's the shit, as we say. Mm-hmm. Frank can play.
Totally. Yeah. The Form of No Forms. Interesting that's mostly about 12-tone theory. That's a provocative title, though. So what do you mean by the Form of No Forms?
Dude, you ask good questions. Good for you.
Thank you.
You deserve a raise. How's that? Yeah. I studied martial arts for years.
Oh, cool.
With some really good people. Not a fighter, not a tournament guy. I just did it. I fell into it and met some guys, and I learned a lot. Well, as soon as you get into martial arts, now you're into Shaolin and Taoism and Buddhism. It's all part of the deal. So you're studying those teachings as well. It just kind of came out of that Form of No Forms.
Okay.
After I wrote the book, a few years later, I saw a book in a martial arts magazine called The Sword of No Swords. I never heard of it when I wrote my book.
Gotcha.
What it means to me is, here, 12 notes. What can you do with those 12 notes? In other words, one of the differences for me, John, is, like I said, I play so many styles. So, I hear these shredders. I'm like, Jesus, dude, killer. But what are you going to do on a rockabilly gig?
Right.
Well, they don't care about that, obviously. I was making a point. But when I go on a rockabilly gig, dude, I am Jerry Lee Lewis and Carl Perkins. But now I'm going to a symphony pops concert, which I did a lot of. Well, now you're reading charts and playing exactly what they want you to play. Now I'm getting a call for a blues gig. Okay. How about a jazz gig? So I can go between those different worlds pretty well. That's what I mean by form and no forms.
Gotcha. So it sounds kind of, you mentioned Taoism and Buddhism. It sounds kind of like a Wu Wei type of, sort of like the water has no form, Bruce Lee type thing.
And I think you get it. There are people that'll ridicule this. I'm thinking, Bubba, put your big boy pants on here. This isn't to be ridiculed. And there's a lot of new agey horse shit that takes those teachings and makes them real simplistic, a little meme about Buddha. It's like,
and profitable.
I just saw a really good documentary on the Buddha, like 2 hours, and they really dug in. He went through a lot. Yeah. You hear, he sat under the tree and achieved enlightenment. Yeah, but what did he do for the 60 years before that? So I like that stuff. But if I would throw in my own 2 cents here, I'm much more aligned with like a Native American teachings, which most people know zip about, even though we live in their land.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. Cool. Yeah, I've considered myself like kind of like a Taoist that, has no real authenticity for a while, but whatever it means to be a Taoist these days. Yeah.
That's a good question. Just riffing again, I had a Tai Chi teacher for a while, Bing Lee, who was quite the feller. And we had lunch once, and he said, a Taoist can be a slumlord. I thought that was interesting. I might not totally agree with that, but I get his point. Again, he wasn't trying to make it into a silly little new agey meme. Taoism's deep and old, and you got to dig in. You got to dig in.
The previous guest I spoke to, Jeffrey Holmes, who's this microtonal composer, he has this whole thing about like Viking warrior poetry. He's a real mystical cat, but like he was also mentioning martial arts, so it's interesting that you were saying it. And I'm curious if you have any sort of like martial art that you would suggest for somebody who's never done it, or if there's any sort of like school that you adhere to.
It's fascinating again. It's so subjective. The guys I studied with was a guy named Ben Dacascos.
Okay.
He's still around. His brother Art just died, and Al Dacascos. There was 3 of them. I never met Al. He was the brother that taught the 2 younger guys. Al would fight guys like Chuck Norris in tournaments. He was a big deal. No, but Al's on the level of Bruce Lee or Chuck Norris. He's just not that well known. So I absorbed a lot of that through Benjamin. I used to go to Ben's house over in Sheridan Street and hang out for hours working on the bag, and he's showing me this. But he was also a guitar player. So I showed him some guitar stuff. But anyway, my favorite style of all was Tai Chi.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry.
Awesome.
Wing Chun.
Okay. Huh.
Which is what Bruce Lee studied with a guy named Yip Man in China. It's a very pared down, simple style, but it's very interesting. From what I've read, hopefully it's true, it came from a Shaolin nun, can't remember her name, who taught it to a young woman named Beautiful Springtime, which translates to Wing Chun.
Interesting. Okay.
And it's a very direct, just fascinating. But that was Bruce Lee's fundamental. And he always talked about Yip Man with great respect. But he also talked about other martial artists later. He called stuff like karate organized despair.
Interesting.
I had my daughter in Taekwondo when she was a little girl. It was great. what Benjamin taught was called one hop kendo, which his brother Allan invented that term. It gets real complex.
Do you ever do any qigong or like more sort of like meditation, introspective stuff?
Well, that was what Tai Chi kind of was.
Mm-hmm.
But soon after I got into Tai Chi, my daughter was born, and you had to do it every day,
Mm-hmm.
like 105 moves. And I just kind of drifted out of it. But I really like Tai Chi. Yes, it's moving meditation.
I'm curious. Are you familiar with the guitarist Dušan Bogdnanovic?
I know the name. I've got a piece of his in one of my albums.
I think you'd appreciate what he's all about. He's one of my favorite composers and guitarists. He does a lot of like sort of Balkan rhythms and like
Yes.
polyrhythmic stuff, and yeah, a real deep dude. Yeah, but he's in Geneva now, and
He's what?
He's in Geneva. He was teaching at the conservatory there, and he just retired. But yeah, brilliant player.
Yeah, I've got a piece of his, what, the Prince's Toys or something. You heard of that?
Not that I know of.
I think it's him.
Hmm,
It's on an album by some Russian classical guitar player.
interesting.
I'll look it up later and email you.
For sure.
I'm pretty sure it's him.
Interesting. Yeah, he's so cool, man. But it's funny. Like I feel like he's one of those people who I'm not sure what he would do with microtonal instruments, but like I feel like he's like, yeah, I've spent too much time doing this stuff. I can't dive into a whole new thing. So
Hey man, just riff. I'm 70. I've done this a while.
mm-hmm.
It really boils down to, the older you get, how much time you got and what do you want to do with it. So I'd love to study Bogdanovic, but I just ain't got the time anymore.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I've got stacks of classical guitar music. I was really into it. I was a restaurant classical player.
Mm-hmm.
I learned a lot of the repertoire, but I'm not a professional like that. But I learned a lot from doing it.
Interesting. Cool, man. Let's see here. So another thing that Bill wanted me to ask you, or thought that would be a good question, is how many instruments do you have? Where's the answer in the book?
Sense of humor. I think I had 30 at one time.
Damn.
I've sold a couple. What did I sell? John took one of the 19-tone basses back. He wanted it, so that's over at his house. And I sold the guitar too, but I've got probably 30.
Awesome. Cool. Let's see here. So I think I've asked most of what I want to ask. Yeah, I guess I did see in a video that you were saying like I don't play chords on this one yet, and so which chords? Sorry, which guitars are you able to play polyphony or polyphonic stuff on?
Oh yeah, 19. The 24-tone equal tempered's been sitting there for years. I just haven't got to it, but I could. Same deal. Play chords in that easily. Again, you can play chords in 31 and 34. Yeah, sure. I haven't played much 31 simply because so many people have done it. So I concentrated on 34.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay.
Like I said, I got one blues tune in 36. I'll send you the video. It's like a Delta blues, really down home, but boy, you can hear the microtones.
Nice.
Dude, I got a CD of some guy playing fretless guitar like jazz standards. So he did it. He got chords going on it. Okay. Again, do I want to spend years learning how to do that? No.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But he did. Good for him. Great.
Yeah, are you into I think they call him Fuse. I forget his last name. It's like
Fiuczynski.
Yeah.
There's a long story there. I actually got invited to do a class of his at Berkeley.
Oh, cool.
In 2004. So I did. We met and hung out a bit, and I did the class and all. We kept in touch for a while, but haven't seen him. No, we just did a Zoom. Do you know Johnny Reinhardt?
I don't know.
Oh, boy. There's another guy. He's a bassoonist.
Okay.
He's living in California now, but he was a New York guy, and he did a yearly festival in New York for like 30 years. Just tons and tons of people came through and original compositions. But anyway, we just did a Zoom, and Fiuczynski was on that.
Rad, cool.
So he's got a thing going at Berkeley. I think he's mostly in the 24 tone equal temperament.
Interesting. Okay. So
And he also plays fretless.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. Are there any other people that you would suggest in this sort of realm? Like, I think like Timucin Sahin comes to mind of like the double neck guitar guy.
What's his name again, please?
I believe it's Timucin Sahin. He has like a double neck guitar where it's like 7-string fretless and then 6-string.
There's a bunch of Turkish guys.
Yeah.
There's a guy named Tolgahan. I can't pronounce his last name. Sorry. I'll send you some names. Tolgahan is kicking ass.
Okay.
He's got one of the classical guitars where you can move the frets.
Gotcha. Nice.
So he actually won a big contest for instruments, not for playing. Pat Metheny was one of the fucking judges, for God's sake. So that guitar of his won a prize for innovation and, for being an innovative piece of gear. Let's put it that way.
Interesting. Okay, cool.
And he's just doing all kinds of shit. He's got a microtonal guitar made out of Legos.
Oh, shit.
Man. It works.
Legos have been coming up in my life so frequently for some reason. It's like the universe telling me something.
Well, Tolgahan is a great guitar player, but he's doing a lot. Again, it's not just the guitar playing for me. And then there's a Erkan Ogur, Turkish guy. He's very mystical. Nobody knows where he is, and he's hard to get a hold of. But man, is he a great fretless guitar player. Just fucking killer. There's a bunch of Turks whose names I don't know, but they pop up in the threads every now and then. Cattler, John Cattler, Schneider. There's so many people. Oh, there's a kid not a kid. I'm 70. Sorry, he's a young man. I'm sorry. Don't be offended.
Oh yeah.
Way we talk at 70. 60-year-old's a kid to me. Come on. What's his last name? Hold on. Oh, here it is. Brendan Burns.
Okay.
Really?
I heard of this name recently.
He'd be a guy you might want to talk to.
Okay, cool. Awesome.
He does a lot of, his new CD is 27 tone.
Cool. Awesome.
This one has 22, 22, 13 limit just intonation, 27, 7. It's beautiful stuff. My stuff tends to be a little more gnarly because I'm a blues guy, but his stuff, I'm using an analogy. It's almost like you're seeing a science fiction movie and you see this beautiful city way out in the horizon with these spires, and that's what his music sounds like to me.
Interesting. That's a great visual.
Very beautiful.
And I mean, 27 tone. So in my mind, I'm thinking 3 cubed, right? 3 cubed. And so I did this video recently about Scott LaFaro and like that tune Jade Visions that he plays with or played with Bill Evans. So it's in 9, and I was like exploring the hypercubic waltz or something like that.
It's a 9.
Yeah, and I mean it's just like da 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 da, but I expanded it to be in 27 and then in whatever 89 whatever the next one is. So it's kind of fun. So we briefly sort of touched on like some of the mystical sort of like cosmically minded music stuff, and I'm curious if you have any opinions on the controversial topic of 440 versus 432.
I guess you can tell. Yes. Look.
Interesting. Okay.
Well, let me kind of explain my philosophy about stuff. We're doing a podcast. Hopefully, people will listen to it. I might speak a little differently to you than I would to a friend in private.
Okay.
I'll bring out the motherfuckers in private more than I would. Okay, just a sense of humor once again. But okay, I have a friend in Denver who I don't know him well. He's so big in 32. Okay, here's the deal. So tune your 12-tone guitar to 432, but all the intervals are still out of tune.
Right. Yeah.
The bass frequency, I believe that numbers mean things, no problem. But again, you got to know the real serious teaching as opposed to new agey horse shit, which is mostly what we get these days. Numbers are Pythagoras. He was huge into numbers. Okay. I get it. But 432, I say to my friend, I won't mention his name, I'll say, on Facebook, look, all the other intervals are still out of tune.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, so you're a little lower than 440, but it's still the same tuning system.
Yeah, this is how I tend to think. Yeah.
Catler's into all that shit, but he's really brilliant. So here's an analogy for the bass frequency. I went to New York in '94 to play one of Reinhardt's festivals. So Catler had a piece that was in 31 and 19 at the same time. How's that?
Okay.
And hey, I was a little nervous, and I'm in New York, and I don't think I played that great, but I survived. But he would tune his instruments to somehow, don't remember, ask Catler. Where I understand the frequency of electronic lighting is like 60 hertz.
Okay.
So he would like tune his instruments to that frequency so they would be in harmony with that rather than fighting it.
Okay. Interesting.
Remember, please, John, if you hear this, don't get pissed. You explain it. But it was something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So he was very aware of different, bass pitches, as you call it.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
But so much of that, John, we didn't have any way of measuring that before electronics.
Right.
So what was Beethoven tuning to? Sure. Mozart, Bach, who knows?
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with everything that you're saying. And it's interesting because, I was talking to Jeffrey Holmes. I asked him about this, and he I was totally surprised because he was like, yeah, I tend to favor 432. And I was like, what? Like, because again, he's doing like sixth tones and quarter tones and all that. And really interesting stuff. But like, I was very surprised that he believed in it at all. Because, I tend to be kind of, I guess, a rationalist atheist type. And I don't want to believe that there's any healing properties to 432 versus 440. But it was interesting because, his, collaborator, Michael Kudirka, is like, I don't believe in it whatsoever. So it's like, you're a smart guy. Why do you? I don't know.
Okay. Again, John, great point. Here's my point. Look, again, I don't want to get into needless intellectual minutia.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm.
If you want to turn to 432 tune, go. I'm not going to debate it. Now, if you ask me my opinion, I'll say, well, I don't think it makes any difference. And you might say, well, it does. Okay, go. In other words, if I'm the emperor of the world, I won't forbid you from tuning to 432. You can go ahead and do that.
So you think the temperament is more important than the sort of reference pitch that you tune everything to?
Again, one more time, just how I riff. Okay, tune to 432, but if all your other notes are out of tune, now what? What's the point? Now, maybe if I tune my 22 tone to 432, well, yeah. Here's an anecdote. Perfect segue. I used to do a lot of stuff in schools, and I got a gig through the union. I got a gig at a elementary school for a week, like making rubber band guitars with the kids. It was cool. But there was a time when we had a break, and all the kids, sixth grade, and all the kids were sitting at their desk. So I got my fretless guitar out, acoustic, and I tuned the strings, by the way, to harmonics. It's very difficult to play. To hit, once you tune to the harmonics, then when you're playing the guitar, you have to match those harmonics with the notes you hit. That takes some work. But the kids were just sitting there, and I had my acoustic tuned to a harmonic tuning, and I started playing, and all of a sudden, see my head, their heads are dropping, and the whole room got so quiet, and the teacher even remarked on it. So the tuning, the pure harmonics were chilling everybody out.
Interesting.
Now that speaks to me. I saw it. I did it. I didn't know that was going to happen. I don't think I was tuned to 432, but the notes were so pure that it does create a different resonance. You used that word earlier. Yeah. So it chilled the whole room out.
Have you ever like fiddled around with like those binaural beats where like one ear gets this and the other ear gets that, and then the difference tone?
Again, fascinating stuff. How much time we got?
I mean, as much as you're willing to take, but
that's right. So people send me this music or that music. Sometimes I miss it just because, yeah, I'll watch that later. And then it starts dropping down in your email list. Oh, fuck, totally forgot that from 2 weeks ago. I can't catch everything. Mm-hmm. What I listen to a lot now, a lot of oud music, really into the oud, classical. If I want to listen to rock or blues, it's Wolf and Hendrix, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But I don't want to recreate the 60s either. I just want to make that point. Mm-hmm. No. We were supposed to move on from that. It's like when Stevie Ray Vaughan came out. God bless him. Great guitar player. But he spent a lot of his career sounding like Jimi Hendrix and Albert King.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Well, I saw Albert King 3 times in 1970. Stevie, love you. I don't need you to sound like Albert. Mm-hmm. Just make it a point. I'm big on originality, dude. If you sound like somebody else, you may be the baddest guy in the world, but you sound like Allan Holdsworth. Well, I already heard Allan Holdsworth. Mm-hmm. I'm big on originality.
I think that's great and really important because, like, I found that when I was, like, you know, in school and stuff, there was this very conservative attitude where it's like people didn't want you to find new material. They didn't want you to, like, try new things. They were like, no, you need to be, like, you know, essentially just like worshiping at the church of Charlie Parker, or, you know, and like you should, but like you shouldn't try to like replicate him because, I mean, you're gonna fail.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Where'd you go to school?
At USC, University of Southern California.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. They have like a guitar program there that was doing studio jazz guitar, and they have like a pretty good jazz studies program. Like Alan Pasqua, the pianist, teaches there.
Oh yeah. Stuff. Well, he played with Holdsworth.
Yep.
I'm a big Holdsworth guy. I mean,
ooh,
I
me too.
Avoided him like the plague in the sense of I didn't want to study him because I didn't want to get any of that in my playing. I got several books of his. I gave them away. Not that I don't, he was a genius, but I don't want you to hear me and go, oh yeah, man, you sound like Holdsworth. Nope.
I mean, did he have anything? I'm trying to pull the book out here real quick. Is this it? Anything besides this one?
I got it. I don't think I gave that one away.
Did he have any other books besides this?
Yeah, he had a couple.
Interesting. Okay.
Again, John, this has been great. You know, we're all going to see things slightly different. I think the important thing is to just respect somebody. Again, we're human beings. So if I don't like somebody's playing, sure, to my friends, I might say, Jesus, that sucks. But I don't need to say that in public. I don't want to hurt this person.
Right.
They're playing their ass off. We can all coexist. But here's what I also tell people. I've been fortunate in my career. When I send CDs out, I usually get pretty good reviews. I got a couple stinkers, but so you send your CD to Downbeat. And I'm good friends now with the guy that does the blues reviews. We became friends over the internet. You can't imagine how many blues CDs this man has heard. So if he gets a guy that sounds like Duane Allman, what's he supposed to do? Say, oh man, killer, you sound like Duane Allman. No, he's going to give you a 1.5 stars. Mm-hmm. Get your own style.
Right.
That's big. I was that way when I was a kid. The big turning point for me, dude, 14, I'd been playing about 6 months, and I heard Jeff Beck on the radio with the Yardbirds doing over, under, sideways, down. I don't know if you go back that far.
I don't go that blue, personally.
Well, after the Beatles, I think the Yardbirds were the greatest rock group of them all because Clapton, Beck, and Page all came out of it. So I heard over, under, sideways, down on the radio at 14, and I thought I had an Arabic station. That's how weird it was. And at that moment, I mean this literally, I said to myself, that's what I want to do. But I don't mean sound like Jeff Beck. Mm-hmm. I meant I want to do something different.
Right.
14. So that was just part of who I was. There was no intellectual component. Nobody said, hey, you need to get your own style. I knew that as a kid. Mm-hmm. And Jeff Beck's still a favorite.
You commented on Allan Holdsworth, and Allan's definitely in my top 3, and so I'm curious if you have any thoughts or feelings, maybe as we wrap up, on my other 2, who are Ben Monder and Egberto Gismonti.
Oh my God.
Those are my 3.
I saw Monder year or so ago with what's the group with Stair Baby.
Okay, yeah.
You
Dan
got
Weiss's
that?
group. Hmm.
We have a pretty good local jazz club here, but the sound was really bad that night, so it didn't sound good. But then I got the album. I think Stair Baby is some of the best fucking fusion guitar I've ever heard in my life. Killer.
Hmm.
I mean, it's out there, and the whole album is just monstrous. Great compositions. And then I've got his another album where he plays solo guitar. It was two double CD,
Oh
solo
yeah,
and
yeah.
trio.
Day After Day, I think,
I
or
can't
something.
remember the name, but the solo one, fuck.
Yeah, and he plays like Emily, and it's fucking insane. Yeah.
That's the tune I listened to over and over. And Gismonti, I've got several albums. I was really a big ECM guy.
Hmm.
They had all the great guitar players for a while. So yeah, Egberto, fuck. So there's your answer.
Cool. Yeah, I just needed you to comment and
Oh,
verify that I have impeccable taste.
Monder, again, how do you play fusion that badass and then play solo that badass? That's not so easy.
Hmm. Man, yeah. When I was in college, I sent him an email because I wasn't having a great time my first year, and I was like, I'm trying to study with you, and he's basically like, well, here's some stuff to practice, and it's the type of thing where like I feel like I've chipped away at 5% of it to this day, and that was like however many years ago. Just like learn these permutations, these permutations, these permutations, like just learning how important permutations is. Like
But
that's
that
a
was really nice that he reached out to you.
yeah.
Good
I
for
mean,
him. Some of those guys are jerks.
totally. He's always been super kind and generous, which is great. Um, so, do you have anything else you want to talk about here before we wrap up?
I could talk for hours, but I really appreciate it. We're just winging it and improvising, and it's very cool.
Yeah, man.
Good
Um,
for you.
it's been super interesting hearing you talk about all this stuff, and I really appreciate that attitude about sort of reverence for the history of the music, but also like not trying to create a carbon copy, trying to do some new stuff because that's essential to my sort of musical spirit. So I'm glad that we're aligned in that way.
It's funny. Like I said, I started playing 56 years ago. I've been doing this a while, and I mean doing it.
Hmm.
Trillions of gigs, student sessions. I used to do a lot of symphony pops, a lot of plays. I did a lot of plays. Those are tough gigs,
Hmm.
tough music. But I did you know who Jason Robert Brown is?
Mm-mm.
Uh, One of the great theater composers. He won a Tony a few years ago. I actually did a play where he was conducting here in Denver for 2 weeks. And trust me, I was nervous. He knows what he wants, but we
Hmm.
we got through it okay. But I did plays, and you got to go in and read 72 pages of music, and you got to nail it.
Hmm.
So I did all that too. It's very good discipline.
Hmm.
You're not playing what you want, you're playing what they wrote.
Right.
But in my gigs, get the fuck out of the way. We're going for it.
Hmm.
So, yes, I respect. You know who Charlie Bird was? You know that name?
I know of it. Yeah.
He was a big deal, jazz on a classical guitar. He was a great player. He had a quote once in Guitar Player I will never forget. And this is me. He says, anybody that can play a G7 chord is my friend. I like
Okay.
that. So a little kid walks up to you and he's got a chord, encourage him. He's a
Hmm.
killer. Go. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. Um, G7. I mean, any G7.
I think he's just making the point that if you pick up a guitar and go for it, let's talk. I have a
Nice.
9-year-old student that I love to death, Roy. His dad studies with me too. He is just the greatest little kid you'd ever meet. He's very funny. He loves my ferrets. He's ferret crazy. You can't keep him away.
Hmm.
But he's playing guitar, bass, and now saxophone at school.
Awesome.
So he brings a sax in. And I showed him the riff, The Spoonful by Howlin Wolf. It goes that spoon, that spoon, that. And he goes honk, 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 honk. He's playing his ass off.
That's great. Yeah.
What are you going to do?
Be
He's
his
playing
friend.
his ass off at 9 years old. Good. He can play Spoonful. Okay. We'll get better. So if we're winding up, yeah, that's good. I got a guy in about a half hour. So
Cool.
look, if you don't mind, I'll email you some stuff.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'll put it all in the show notes for other people to check out, and yeah, it sounds great.
Um, but I mean, I'm talking about like with blues and the Yardbirds and that. There's some stuff you might want to look at.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, I feel like, I appreciate all types of music, but I spent a long time being very opinionated and very narrow-minded. Open-minded in that narrow-mindedness, but yeah, I'm more receptive to things nowadays.
You're not alone in that. And like I said, I'm 70, but I had my share of ego when I was younger,
Mm-hmm.
and I was able to lose most of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, if I see somebody that doesn't play that good, I don't need to kick their dick. Who cares?
Mm-hmm.
Again, they're a human. They're up there playing. They're doing the best they can. Now, that being said, one more comment. I have a good friend named Bob Lohr, keyboard player. He played with Chuck Berry for the last 18 years of Chuck's life.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of great blues. He's one of the best blues pianists. He's in the lineage, man. He's a badass. And, there was a head cutting thing in blues back in the Chicago days. The bands would compete, and whoever was the best band would get the gig. So it meant something.
Mm-hmm.
And Muddy Waters had a band. They were so bad that they'd walk into the club, and the club owner would say, "You win." They didn't have to play. They were so bad. So the other side of me, I don't mean you, of course. I mean anybody. You give me that same respect. If you try to kick my dick, don't go there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that. And I really don't like that. I mean, seriously, elitism.
Mm-hmm.
So, sometimes I think about a little head cutting contest here in Denver with the other blues people, but that's my street. Okay, you think you're badass, huh?
Mm-hmm.
You really do. Remember, I'm just riffing here.
Right.
That was a thing in the blues scene, and jazz guys got into that too. There was a lot of head cutting. Those jam sessions in Kansas City in the 30s. I just read a great story. I have a book called Jazz Anecdotes. Hundreds of stories. Really cool. And, Coleman Hawkins, who was one of the big dudes. 1934 in Kansas City. Mary Lou Williams talked about this in the book. She's sleeping this night, and there's a knock at her window at 4 a.m, and it's one of the guys says, hey, pussycat, you got to come down to the club. The piano players are so tired. We need a new piano. They've been jamming since like 9 o'clock. But Coleman Hawkins was there. And here's what Mary Lou said. It appeared he ran into something he wasn't expecting. In other words, the Kansas City boys were giving him a hard time. He wasn't out playing them. So he was down to his undershirt. He stripped his shirt off, and he's got they call it a singlet, those old man undershirts. He stripped down to his singlet, and he couldn't play around the Kansas City boys.
Interesting.
And then he got in his car. He had a gig in St. Louis, and he blew his car out driving to St. Louis. I like those stories.
Those all sound good. Real quick, I was asking if anybody I knew had questions for you, and somebody wanted to know if you had any sort of St. Louis anecdotes that you wanted to share beyond that.
Yeah, tons of them. Miles was from East St. Louis. Well, my friend Bob, who I just mentioned, in 1970, we were putting our blues band together. Me and the harmonica player lived in Kansas City. We were going to school, and the bass player and drummer were from St. Louis. So we went to St. Louis for the summer and hung out, and it was a hell of a summer. We were up all night doing acid and doing this and that. Well, Bob took us over to East St. Louis to jam at the Wagon Wheel. And here's what I tell people, there's all this woke horse shit about race now. Don't give me any kumbaya shit about going to East St. Louis. If you're white, you could get killed or beat up. End of ball game. So you had to go over there with somebody. So Bob took us over. Nobody even paid any attention to us. We did a set. We stopped the crap game in the back. That's how we knew they liked us. The guys playing craps came out to look at us. I'm saying that with some humor, but that was a big deal.
For sure, yeah.
And so we jammed in East St. Louis. Did we go over there all the time? No. But Bob had a house gig over there at 18 years old, for fuck's sake. But here's a story from Bob, from a magazine. He was playing there one night, and they heard a big explosion. So they went out front, and there was a crater, and there was a guy from Nam. He said that was incoming. Somebody had shot a fucking mortar round at the club.
Damn.
That's how bad it was.
Yay.
Yeah, you've heard about chicken wire in the country bars, but how many guys get a mortar shot at them? So there's an anecdote about East St. Louis. How's that?
Damn. Yeah. Well, hey.
Yeah. True story. So Bob's retired now too. Muddy, Chuck died a couple years ago, but we just did a demo with my trio. He wants to play on it. So we did some tracks and we emailed him the tracks. So he's going to put his piano parts on in St. Louis.
Nice.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Awesome.
So that's kind of where I'm at, just doing this and that.
Cool. Well, I'm gonna have to take a leak here. So,
Me too.
I feel like we should wrap it up. Neil, it's been an utter pleasure talking to you. Please stay in touch, and you're always welcome back on here if you'd like to talk more.
Let me say, I really appreciate it. I did a radio show once in Boulder. I was the guest. The guy talked about himself for 20 minutes. It was pretty embarrassing. But if I was interviewing you, you'd be talking all the time. That's what we do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, yeah. I feel like I have no need to try to compete with interesting stuff because I'm not going to win.
Well, but again, you're the host and you're interviewing somebody. That's what you're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
You can tell the good interviewer because they let the person talk, but yet your questions are very, very insightful.
I appreciate it, man.
Well,
I try to. I do my best.
If you can't ask a good question, then the guy being interviewed has nothing to say.
Mm-hmm.
And the Beatles used to get a deal with that. They were always asking about their favorite toothpaste instead of their music.
Yeah.
And they got tired of it after a while. It's like, what the fuck? Yeah, ask me a question about something.
It's nice to know like little tidbits about people's personality and stuff, but like, yeah, I don't care what toothpaste you use. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm a big Beatles guy. Beatles, Hendrix. Here, if you want to sum up the 60s, very, vaguely. For rock, Beatles, Dylan, Hendrix. Probably Dylan, Beatles, Hendrix. Dylan was such an influence on people. Fucking unbelievable. And then in jazz, you had Coltrane and, Miles and all that. So they kind of sum up that era of music when the shit was really happening.
Mm-hmm.
Really happening. So I was hoping with microtones we might get that again, and maybe we will.
Well, hopefully.
Okay. You go take a whiz. I got a student, and I'll be sending you stuff.
Awesome. Beautiful.
All right. Thanks a lot, dude.
Yeah. Thanks so much for talking to me, man. It's been a pleasure.
Next
I'll
time.
see you in the future.
All right.
All right. See you, man.
Bye.